What happens when the coldest heart in the galaxy, an 8-foot alien queen bred for war, discovers warmth in the arms of a fragile human soldier and something growing inside her that defies every law of her kind? The snow never stopped falling on the mountain peaks of Uranus. Thick clouds floated low, and the cold cut through skin like glass. In the middle of this icy world stood the tall towers of the Zirzen stronghold, built into a cliff of shining blue stone. Wind howled outside, but inside the great throne hall, a different storm was brewing. Queen Thalzura sat upon her high seat made of carved crystal and bone. She was over 8 feet tall, her skin a deep silver blue, her sharp eyes glowing like frozen stars. The hall was full of her war generals, each wrapped in armor lined with animal fur. They waited for the queen to speak, but she was laughing. Before her stood a single human, Captain Elias Rowe. He looked small in this place of giants. His brown hair was messy, his jacket still wet from the cold. But he didn't look afraid. He stood straight, hands behind his back, eyes locked on the queen's without blinking. "This," Thalzura said, her voice echoing like thunder, "is what the Earth delegation sends me? A human soldier? As a bride gift." She threw her head back and laughed again. Her generals joined her, the sound shaking the ice chandeliers. Elias stayed quiet. He knew better than to speak during mockery. Instead, he let the laughter pass over him like wind. "They think this will make peace?" she continued, stepping down from her throne. "You will bond with me? You will breed with me." She walked around him in a slow circle. "You're soft. Your bones are fragile. You wouldn't last one night." Elias smiled faintly. "I was told you enjoy challenges, Your Majesty." Some of the generals stopped laughing. A few glanced at the queen to see her reaction. Thalzira narrowed her eyes. For a moment, something flickered in them. Curiosity, perhaps. Then she snorted. "Put him in the observation wing," she ordered. "Feed him. Keep him warm. I want to watch how long he lasts before asking to go home." Guards came forward. Elias turned and followed without protest. As they led him through the tall corridors carved from mountain stone, he whispered to himself, "Well, that went better than expected." Outside the hall, one young guard leaned close and whispered, "You're lucky." Others didn't even make it past introductions. Elias gave a small shrug. "Maybe she just likes my smile." In truth, he didn't know why he was still alive. The mission had been called hopeless by many back home, but he had volunteered anyway, not because he believed in peace, but because he had nothing left to lose. Now, walking through alien stone hallways under ice-colored lights, he realized something strange. He wasn't scared. Something inside him stirred. Not fear, not even anger, just a feeling, a quiet pull, as if fate had brought him here for more than politics. And somewhere behind him, Queen Thalzura stood still in her hall, her laughter now gone. She looked toward the door long after he had left, her expression unreadable. The cold mountain wind outside began to howl louder. The wind outside the mountain fortress howled like a living creature, but inside, all was quiet. Queen Thalzura stood alone on her balcony, staring into the white mist that swallowed the sky. The snow-covered cliffs stretched endlessly below. Her breath made no mist in the cold air. Her body had been designed to survive even the frozen death of Uranus. But tonight, she felt a strange warmth lingering from earlier. The human. She had laughed at him, mocked the very idea that someone like him could stand beside her. Yet when he looked in her eyes and said, "Maybe she just likes my smile," he hadn't flinched. No fear. No begging, just calm confidence. That was rare. She didn't like it. Inside her mind, trained to think only of strength and power, something uneasy stirred. In the observation wing, Elias sat on a stone bench wrapped in thick fur. A tray of hot broth sat beside him, mostly untouched. The food wasn't bad, just strange. Purple roots and thick blue liquid with a taste of salt and spice. He wasn't cold anymore. The Zirzen knew how to build warmth into their halls, but he still felt watched. The walls were made of shimmering stone, and strange glowing patterns moved across them, like eyes blinking slowly in the dark. Somewhere above, a floating orb recorded his every move. It hummed quietly, as if alive. He stood up and stretched, letting out a long breath. "Well, this is better than a holding cell," he said aloud. "But I wouldn't mind a window." One of the guards outside the door chuckled. "Humans love windows," she said through the comm, always looking out, never in. Elias smiled. "Maybe we're just curious." The door slid open, and a figure stepped inside. Not a guard. It was one of the Queen's inner circle, Commander Vreth, tall and lean with markings carved into his armor. "You've been quiet," the commander said. "I'm thinking," Elias replied, "trying to understand why I'm still alive." Vreth gave a nod. "You amuse the Queen. That's rare. Lucky me. She does not laugh easily," Vreth added. "She was not made for joy." Elias tilted his head. "Made?" Vreth paused, then answered, "She was grown in the forge of queens. Not born like you. She was built for war, for leading armies. Feelings are not encouraged." That explained a lot. "Still," Elias said. She laughed. Vreth's eyes narrowed. "That is why you are dangerous." Before Elias could reply, the commander left. The door hissed shut behind him, leaving Elias with more questions than answers. Back in her private chamber, Queen Thelzura stood before a hologram, Elias's face glowing faintly in the blue light. She replayed his words again and again. The way he spoke, the tone, the calm. He was not like the other humans she had seen in battle reports. He was not weak, but he was not cruel either, and she did not know whether that made him her greatest threat, or something far more confusing. The snow outside continued to fall. The next morning, Elias woke up to soft blue light filling his chamber. The walls gently glowed, pulsing like a heartbeat. His fur blanket had slipped off during the night, and cold air nipped at his skin. He sat up slowly, yawning and stretching. Though he was a prisoner, the room didn't feel like a jail. There were no bars, no chains, just strange beauty and silence. A tray of food had already been delivered. Steamed roots, glowing berries, and a drink that smelled sweet and metallic. He took a small bite, chewing thoughtfully. "Still not Earth food," he muttered, "but at least it's not poison." Elias stood and walked to the wall. With a soft tap, part of it opened to reveal a wide hallway. The doors here seemed to respond to thought more than touch. He still didn't know how it worked, but he was curious, and boredom had never been his friend. A female Zirzan guard waited just outside. She was tall, with soft gray armor and skin like smooth stone. She raised an eyebrow when she saw him. "You're allowed to walk the West Halls," she said. "No weapons, no climbing, no speaking to servants." Elias nodded. "Got it. No sword fights or karaoke." She didn't smile. "I don't know what karaoke means." "Better that way," he said with a grin. As they walked, Elias took in the sights of the fortress. The walls were made of crystal mixed with volcanic rock, glowing softly in patterns. Snowflakes drifted down through openings in the ceiling, melted instantly by warm air flowing from hidden vents. Strange flying lights buzzed overhead. He didn't know if they were bugs or machines. They passed a training hall where tall warriors practiced battle drills. Their movements were sharp and fluid. They didn't glance at Elias, but he felt their awareness, measured, alert. Then he heard something different. A roar. Deep, low, and alive. "What was that?" he asked. The guard hesitated. "The mountain beasts. Frostclaws. We keep them in the lower caverns. For hunting or war. Big." She stared ahead. "Big enough to tear your metal ships apart." "Right," Elias said. "I'll be sure not to pet one." They turned a corner and entered a room filled with floating displays. A large map of Uranus's polar regions hovered in the center. Heat lines, movement trails, and battle zones were marked in flashing red. It looked like a war room, but no one else was inside. The guard said nothing. She simply watched him. Elias moved closer to the map. It was a digital display, but beautifully crafted, like someone had cared about how it looked, not just how it worked. He ran his fingers through the glowing air. He didn't feel like a prisoner now. He felt like a question, a test. A small human piece dropped into a large alien game. And far above, in her private chamber, Queen Thalzura stood watching through a high crystal lens. Her arms crossed, her face unreadable. She watched him walk, explore, speak. And once again, she found herself wondering, why hasn't he broken yet? That evening, the sky above the mountain fortress turned a deep violet. The snowy winds outside howled like distant voices, but inside the war chamber, it was strangely warm. Queen Thalzura sat at the head of a long crystal table, surrounded by her generals. The room was shaped like a star, each point holding a different leader of her forces. Maps floated above the table, glowing with movement, signals of enemy scouts, weather changes, and supply lines. Elias stood near the edge of the room. He wasn't supposed to speak, just observe. But when he saw the latest map update, something caught his eye. "Those patrols," he said, pointing to a red marker near the base of canyon. "They're too close together. You'll lose visibility in the next snowstorm." The room went quiet. Several generals turned their heads sharply. One let out a small scoff. Another leaned forward as if ready to speak, but Thalzura raised her hand. She looked at Elias with her cold eyes. "You understand the Zirzin patrol strategy now." "I understand snow," Elias replied calmly. "I've led rescue teams through worse terrain on Europa. That kind of formation traps your people if a whiteout hits. You'll lose more to frost than to enemies." The queen leaned back in her seat. "You suggest we trust a human's advice?" "I suggest you don't waste good soldiers," Elias said. "Your enemies don't have to fight you if the weather does it for them." The room remained silent for a moment. Then, one of the older generals, his skin marked with battle scars, grunted. "The human's words hold some truth." Another nodded slowly. "He has seen things we haven't." Queen Thalzura tapped her clawed finger against the crystal table. Her gaze never left Elias. He didn't back down. He didn't look away. "You speak boldly," she said. "I was brought here as an offering," Elias answered, "but I'm not a fool. If I see something wrong, I'll say it." The queen stood. Her tall figure cast a long shadow across the glowing maps. The room felt colder for a moment. "Very well," she said. "Adjust the patrols, and give the human his voice for now." The generals obeyed, though not all looked pleased. After the meeting, Elias was walking alone in a side hallway when a quiet voice called out behind him. "You risk much by speaking out." He turned to see Thalzura herself, walking without guards. She was tall and quiet as snow, but her steps made no sound. "I speak because I care what happens here," Elias replied, "even if I'm not supposed to." The queen studied him for a long moment. "You surprise me, human." Elias gave a small smile. "I get that a lot." She didn't smile back, but her eyes held something different this time. Not mockery, not anger. A flicker of thought, a trace of interest. Then she turned and walked away, her silver cape trailing behind her. Elias watched her go, the warmth of her presence lingering. The ice had not cracked, but something beneath it had started to burn. Snow fell heavy that morning, covering the mountain with a white blanket that hid even the deepest tracks. Inside the fortress, horns echoed through the halls. The trial of Frostfang had been announced. A dangerous test meant to prove a warrior's strength, skill, and heart. It was rare, only called when a warrior needed to earn great honor, or when they needed to be humbled. Today it was for Elias. He stood at the center of the Colosseum, carved from ice and stone, wearing a fur-lined coat and holding a spear longer than he was tall. All around him, thousands of Zirzin warriors filled the stands, their cheers deep and wild. This was not just a trial, it was entertainment. High above, Queen Thalzura sat on her throne, watching closely. She had given the order. She told herself it was just a test, a way to end the talk around him. But deep down, she was curious. Would he break or rise? Elias looked up at the gates. He had been told very little. Just a name, Frostfang. It sounded like something sharp and deadly. The gate creaked open. From the shadows stepped a creature unlike any he had seen. 10 feet tall, covered in thick white fur, with claws like swords and eyes that glowed blue. Its breath came in clouds, and its long tail dragged across the floor like a whip. The Frostfang roared. The crowd cheered louder. Elias swallowed hard but stood his ground. The creature charged, its massive limbs thundering across the ice. Elias dove to the side, just in time. The ground cracked where he had stood. He rolled and jumped to his feet, holding the spear tightly. "All right, big guy," he muttered. "Let's not make this personal." He didn't try to fight with strength. He couldn't win that way. Instead, he watched, moved, and thought. Every time the beast lunged, Elias used its weight against it. He ducked under strikes, slid across the ice, and stayed just out of reach. The crowd began to quiet. After several near misses, Elias noticed something. The beast's left leg was injured. It limped slightly, favoring one side. It had been hurt before. Elias changed his plan. Instead of attacking, he threw his spear to the ground and raised both hands. The beast hesitated. No warrior had ever stopped fighting during the trial. Slowly, Elias stepped forward, speaking softly. "I don't want to hurt you. I know you're in pain. This doesn't have to end with blood." The frost fawn growled, uncertain. Then, to everyone's shock, it stopped. Its shoulders lowered. Its breathing slowed. It looked into Elias's eyes and backed away. Gasps filled the Colosseum. Elias turned to face the queen. No weapon, no victory through violence. Just understanding. High on her throne, Thalzira stood. Her face was calm, but her heart beat faster. She had sent him into the trial to watch him fail or prove something. Instead, he had done something else entirely. He had changed the rules. The days after the trial of Frostfang were filled with whispers. Elias's name spread through the icy halls like warm breath on glass. He had not only survived, but won the trial in a way no Zirzin ever had, without violence. Some warriors respected him. Others called it weakness. But no one could ignore him anymore. Queen Thalzira watched it all in silence. She told herself it didn't matter. The human was still just a guest, nothing more. But each day, she found herself thinking about the trial, about the way the Frostfang had lowered its head, about the way Elias had looked up at her, proud but peaceful. She began asking more questions about him. What did he do in his spare time? What did he say to the guards? What kind of stories did he tell? She didn't realize she was becoming curious. Curious and something more. Elias was given more freedom. He wandered the mountain fortress with less guard presence now, studying the strange technology, learning the alien symbols. He spent his nights near the glowing stone fires, sometimes speaking with low-ranking soldiers who had grown used to his presence. He had started to understand the Zirzin better, not just their language, but their silence, their honor, their deep pride. These are not just war machines. They were people shaped by cold and war. And still, he hadn't spoken to the queen since the trial. Not until one evening. He was walking through one of the frost gardens, a quiet place filled with ice sculptures and slow-moving light creatures, when a figure appeared from the mist. Queen Thalzira. No guards, no crown, just her tall form wrapped in a silver cloak, her glowing eyes soft in the low light. "You walk often," she said. Elias stopped, surprised but not afraid. "Helps me think." She stepped closer. What does a human think about in a place like this? He smiled slightly. Why the queen of an empire is talking to him alone? She raised an eyebrow. Curiosity. "Mine or yours?" he asked. For a moment, she didn't answer. They stood together in silence, watching snow fall through the open sky window above. The frost garden shimmered like a dream. The cold no longer felt cruel. It felt calm. Finally, Thalzira spoke. "You could have killed the beast. It would have been easier." "I didn't want to win that way," Elias said. "I wanted to show something better." "And what is better than strength?" He looked up at her. "Mercy." She studied him, her face unreadable. Then, slowly, she sat beside him on the frozen stone bench. It was the first time they'd ever been at the same level. "You confuse me, human." "Good," Elias said gently. "Maybe it's time someone did." They sat there for a long time, saying little. No guards, no audience, no politics, just two figures in the quiet garden of ice. And though nothing was spoken, something important passed between them. Not commands, not questions, just warmth, quiet and new. A small thaw inside two frozen hearts. The snowstorm came without warning. Thick clouds covered the mountain, and strong winds rattled the high towers of the fortress. Inside, torches flickered and the walls groaned as the storm pressed against the crystal walls like a living thing. It was the worst storm in many years, and all movement was stopped. Training grounds closed. Meetings canceled. Everyone stayed indoors. Elias had been walking through the lower halls, trying to return to his room, when a loud crack echoed through the stone. The ground shook beneath him. A deep rumble rolled through the corridor. Then everything went dark. A support beam had fallen, cutting off the tunnel behind him. Snow poured through a broken vent above, and the cold rushed in like ice water. "Hello," Elias shouted, waving the snow from his eyes. "Is anyone there?" A voice answered, deep, sharp, familiar. "I am here." Out of the mist stepped Queen Thalzira. Her cloak was soaked, and her long silver hair clung to her face. She had been walking through the tunnel as well. Now they were both trapped. Elias blinked. Well, of all the people to be stuck with in a snowstorm. The queen gave short breath. It might have been a laugh. They looked around. The cave had sealed on both ends. Snow was still falling through the crack in the ceiling, and the temperature was dropping fast. "There's no way out until the storm passes," Thalzira said, voice calm. Elias nodded. "Then we wait." They found shelter in a small corner of the tunnel where the snow couldn't reach. Elias lit a small fire with supplies hidden in the wall, emergency kits used by soldiers. The flames flickered low but gave just enough warmth. They sat across from each other in silence. Elias rubbed his arms. "Your people really enjoy cold, don't they?" Thalzira looked at him. "It teaches strength, or makes you miss the sun," he replied, smiling. She didn't smile back, but her eyes stayed on him longer than usual. In the soft firelight, her face looked less harsh. Less like a queen, more like someone lost in thought. "Why do you keep trying to speak to me?" she asked. Elias shrugged. "Because I see you. Not just a warrior, not just a leader, but a person." She didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. Hours passed. The cold pressed in harder. Even with the fire, their bodies began to ache. Thalzira shivered slightly, a rare sign of weakness. Elias stood and walked over, kneeling beside her. "You'll lose warmth if you sit alone." She didn't move. "I'm not trying to disrespect you," he said softly. "But we're both flesh and bone. We could share warmth. Nothing more." Still, she hesitated. Then slowly she nodded. He wrapped a thick blanket around them both, sitting beside her, shoulder to shoulder. Her skin was cold at first, but warmed quickly beside his. They didn't speak again, but as the storm howled outside, the silence between them was no longer empty. It was full of something neither of them could name. The storm finally passed. Snow stopped falling, the winds grew quiet, and the sky above the mountain fortress cleared. But inside Queen Thalzira's private chamber, another kind of storm had just begun. She stood in front of the medical console, arms crossed tightly. Her face was cold and still, but her mind raced. The screen before her showed glowing symbols. The result was clear. She was pregnant. Impossible. She had been created not for love, not for family, but for war. Her body was supposed to resist such changes. Yet now, the growing life inside her proved otherwise. It was real, and it was Elias's. She turned away from the screen, pacing across the room. The walls felt smaller than ever before. Her footsteps echoed, sharp and fast. She had faced enemies, betrayal, death, but nothing had shaken her like this. A child, a half-human child. How would her people react? The council? The soldiers who looked to her as a symbol of power and purity? They would call her weak, corrupted, unfit. Elias didn't know anything yet. He had returned to his daily walks through the fortress. Some guards greeted him with small nods. Others looked at him with quiet suspicion. But no one dared to speak about the queen or the trial, not out loud. He noticed Thalzira's absence. For 3 days, she hadn't spoken to him. No quiet visits. No surprise meetings in Frost Gardens. It was as if she had vanished. Then one evening, a guard came to him. "The queen wishes to see you." He entered the chamber slowly. It was quiet, the lights dim. Thalzira stood near the far window, looking out at the snowy mountains. Her arms were behind her back, her shoulders tight. "You called for me," Elias said gently. She didn't turn around. Yes. There was silence between them for a long time. Then she spoke again, her voice lower than usual. I am with child. Elias froze. What? She turned now. Her eyes met his. It is yours. He stepped forward, his mouth slightly open, searching for words. I didn't plan this, she said. I didn't think it was even possible. But the tests are clear. He nodded slowly. And how do you feel about it? Thalzira's face twisted for just a moment. Not in pain, but in something close to fear. I feel everything, and nothing. This changes everything I am. Elias stepped closer. You're more than what they made you to be. She looked at him sharply. They will say I am weak, that I have betrayed my purpose. And what do you say? She didn't answer. Instead, she whispered, I need time. Elias nodded. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. She looked at him, eyes softening slightly. Outside, snow began to fall again, light and gentle, like a blanket covering the past. Inside, the queen stood still, torn between duty and a future she never imagined. And within her, a new life had already begun.